Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking about some Fantastic Four comics. Now I don't really know what to call this set of comics. It chronicles one of the Fantastic Four's many clashes with Galactus over the years of their existence. This one is written and drawn by John Byrne, which is really nice. I do think that this is just a really interesting story. You can one of the really cool things about it is that it's all about you get the entire Marvel universe is in this story, or you kind of see everyone that you would expect to see if Galactus did come to Earth. It's very nice because that's not something that can always be said about Marvel, and it's something that's nice about the kind of 70s and 80s generation of comic creators. They were really good about including the Marvel universe, or at least making a passing reference. If the in this story it's all happening on New York, so naturally the question would come up: where are the Avengers? Where's Spider-Man? Where's Daredevil? Where's Doctor Strange? They all live in New York. Well, as you can maybe kind of sort of see by the cover, they're all here. They all are here. Doctor Strange, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Wasp, Fantastic Four. I think that this is a really interesting story. I think it gets into a lot of really interesting concepts about who Galactus is, and you also get some good, like, what is the nature of being a hero stuff coming from Reed Richards, actually. And I do think it's just a pretty good story. Like I said, written and drawn by John Byrne. This story was released in 1982, and so this was kind of about a year deep into John Byrne's run on Fantastic Four, or this would have been like the end of his first year on Fantastic Four, and it's a pretty good story. It's really interesting. The Fantastic Four the Fantastic Four play a big role in it. Obviously, it's a Fantastic Four story, but they don't play the role you would expect them to play. And you'll kind of see what I mean once we actually get into the recap on the story. I do think it's really interesting. There are a couple things worth noting. This is the Fantastic Four's. This is not their first time fighting Galactus. And Galactus also has had many heralds at this point, and the heralds of Galactus are these beings imbued with power cosmic, so that they can go and scout out worlds for Galactus to eat. And they don't scout out worlds based on is this world uninhabited so that Galactus can eat it. No, they base it off of does it have the elements that Galactus will need to survive. And that's something of an interesting point. But yeah, there's kind of just a lot that goes on throughout this story that doesn't get much of an explanation, but it kind of just happens and it kind of just makes sense. So I do really like it, and honestly, I think I'm ready to hop into our story, which opens in deep space, where we see Terrax, the Tamer, the current herald of Galactus, but he's kind of just flying through space, and through the dialogue boxes we see that he's no longer serving his master, Galactus. Back on Earth, we see brief vignettes of all of our characters living their lives in New York, seeing Reed and Sue, the real names of Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Woman, packing up their Christmas tree in the Baxter Building, the Thing fighting some muggers in Central Park, and we see the Human Torch, or Johnny Storm, and his girlfriend Frankie Reyes as they visit a friend of theirs at a theater. But their visit is short-lived, as some sort of cosmic-scale chaos has overtaken the New York skyline. So Johnny and Frankie fly into action, but before we get to see what's going on with them, we cut to the Baxter Building, where we see Reed and Sue are trying to figure out what's going on. But before long, Frankie and Johnny bring the action to them as the top two floors of the Baxter building are destroyed and Terrax arrives on the scene. Terrax comes out swinging, smashing Thing through the building into the basement before Human Torch tries attacking, but he is also batted away, as is Mr. Fantastic. Thing then crawls his way up through the basement and punches Terrax halfway across New York. But Terrax is not easily stopped as he flies to the top of the World Trade Center and begins using his power on Manhattan Island. And with the help of Invisible Woman, we are able to see Terrax begin to sever Manhattan Island from the rest of New York. We then cut away and we see Spider-Man, Thor, Iron Man, and Daredevil are all approaching the oncoming disaster. As Thor and Iron Man begin to work to save everyone's lives who are in the tunnels, which are now being flooded by water. We get some really good Thor drawings in here. But anyway, the island is rising to the sky, and we see that the Fantastic Four decide to divide their forces, keeping Invisible Woman and Frankie Reyes at the Baxter building so that Sue can keep the energy field visible, mostly so that the rest of the Fantastic Four can follow it, but also so that the people of New York City can't see the horrors that they're confident are going to unfold. And the rest of the team goes to confront Terrax, but he has taken the island into outer space. And he shows the Fantastic Four why he has sought them out. And he wants them to kill a Galactus who has had his power greatly diminished by his chase of Terrax across the cosmos. And to ensure their compliance, Terrax is threatening to end the lives of every being on Manhattan Island should they fail. Back on Earth, we see Invisible Woman explain who Terrax is to Frankie, who leaves the interaction having a strange fascination with Galactus. Up in space, we see the Fantastic Four begrudgingly agree to Terrax's terms before they fly into Galactus's ship. When we then cut inside the ship, where we see Galactus harness the last of his energy reserves for the upcoming conflict. The Fantastic Four then arrive in Galactus's chamber, and Mr. Fantastic explains that he doesn't view Galactus as his enemy, and so they begin to speak. But Terrax decides, they've taken too long, so he slashes open the hull of Galactus's ship, and Galactus gets mad. Immediately, he just undoes everything that Terrax has done, restoring Manhattan Island to its proper place, and stripping Terrax of the title of Herald, and sending him crashing back down to Earth. Galactus then begins the process needed to consume the Earth, and he isolates the Fantastic Four into little pocket spheres, and Galactus starts feeding because he knows he is not going to have the power, the energy to make it to. If he tries to go to another planet, he won't make it. He will starve to death. But before Galactus can truly begin consuming the Earth, he is struck by cosmic lightning blasts from Thor. Then Iron Man comes in and blasts Galactus with his repulsors. By the time Galactus makes it to the ground, the Fantastic Four are freed. Thor keeps on wailing on Galactus, and the rest of the Avengers have showed up as well. We then see that Spider-Man and Daredevil are watching the fight, staying ready to join the action if the Fantastic Four and Avengers fail. Although even Daredevil notes that if the Fantastic Four and Avengers fail, him and Spider-Man aren't going to be able to do much. Next, we see Doctor Strange join the fight, casting a spell on Galactus, which causes him to feel the pain of all the souls that he has killed in his hunger. And as Galactus reels from the pain, Mr. Fantastic slingshots the thing into Galactus, and Galactus falls. As the heroes surround Galactus, Reed Richards throws down the gauntlet, saying that they need to try to save Galactus, as he is still a living being, therefore worthy of keeping his life. Over the next few hours, they attempt to do just that, creating machines put energy into Galactus powered by Thor's lightning. We see that it works, and Galactus is revived. Reed then brings Galactus back to the Baxter building so that they can find an uninhabited planet for him to consume. And Reed is able to find 6, but Galactus is worried because if the planets are unsuitable for him, he will starve to death on the journey. We then see Frankie volunteer to become the next Herald of Galactus, which Galactus accepts, giving her additional powers so she can survive in deep space. And she takes off soaring through the skies. But Johnny, who remembers her boyfriend, goes chasing after her, distraught, horrified at what she has agreed to, trying to get her to come back. But Johnny is unable to follow far enough before his flames almost snuff out in the atmosphere, and he goes crashing back down to Earth, while Frankie soars away into the cosmos. Back on Earth, we see Galactus once again agree to never consume the Earth in exchange for the kindness and mercy demonstrated to him by the Fantastic Four, and then he kind of just leaves. And that is more or less where the story ends. We do see there is more to the last issue than what I said, but it's basically just Mr. Fantastic and Johnny telling the other girl from the beginning of the story that Frankie's gone, and then a bunch of setup for the next for upcoming Fantastic Four stories. So I didn't really feel the need to incorporate them into the recap. But yeah, that's the story, and it's pretty good. It's got some really interesting concepts in there. We see a lot of through a lot of the dialogue. We learn a lot about Galactus, about his nature, about how he views his nature, how he was once human, but then became the towering behemoth, planet devourer that he is in for most of Marvel history. It's really interesting to see the threat of Terrax, because Terrax was a character that the Fantastic Four had fought previously, but Galactus hadn't showed up in a Fantastic Four comic for a while. He'd been making other appearances throughout the Marvel Universe and Rom the Space Knight and in Dazzler, but this was his first kind of return back to the Fantastic Four comic for a while, at least as a threat. Because the last time we saw him return, he was actually an ally of the Fantastic Four. But yeah, like I said, there's a lot going on with this story. It's really well drawn. The writing on it's interesting. I like that every member of the Fantastic Four, except for really the Thing, has something to do in the story. And I think that's really nice. Because, yeah, you have the personal conflict in Human Torch when Frankie leaves and he has to, he's in love, and then all of a sudden that's stripped away from him because she goes gallivanting off into the universe. We have the Invisible Woman is able to, she spends most of the story literally just kind of holding the bubble around Manhattan Island to be visible. But other than that, she doesn't do too much, but it is an important part of the story, and it's a good way to explain. It's a good use for her character, because what is she going to do to fight Galactus? But to be fair, what are any of them going to do? But it's a good way to kind of it's a good way to break down the cast a little bit, so that you're not dealing with all 4 of your characters in every situation. Because it's hard to make them shine, and we really see that because Reed Richards really does Mr. Fantastic really does take the spotlight for most of this story, which is, to be fair, I think a good thing. I liked that it was very within Reed Richards' character to save Galactus right at the end. I thought that made a lot of sense for his character. Yeah, overall, I think it's just a pretty good story. I really dig the Marvel Universe aspects of it. That's actually why I chose to read this story, was because I really wanted to, because I saw this cover that I keep showing off with Galactus and the Avengers and Doctor Strange and the Fantastic Four. I've always really liked this cover, so I so it really caught my eye when I was kind of looking for something to read, and I was like, oh, these look really good. I remember seeing them a while ago, and I was right, they're pretty good. And it was, to me, it was a good introductory story for the Fantastic Four, because like I said, I haven't read very much Fantastic Four. I grew up watching the cartoon from the 90s, so I do know, I know the characters, I know of their abilities, I know all that. And they're in a bunch of the crossover material for the Marvel Universe, so I am familiar with them. But yeah, overall, I just think it's definitely a story that I would recommend. We'll see what this video ends up being titled. There's no trade paperback of just this story, which is surprising to me, because it's a pretty compact and fairly well isolated story, and it's pretty good. It's definitely worth reading, I would say. If you're a Marvel Universe fan, if you like cosmic scale events, I would very much so recommend. I think it's definitely worth a read. Anyway, that's really all I have to say on this, I think, unless there's no, I did want to talk about the art. The art in this story is absolutely gorgeous. You saw throughout the video. Galactus, the John Byrne's art, he just nails it. And I say John Byrne does the art. He wrote the comic, he penciled the comic, and he inked the comic. The only things he didn't do were lettering and coloring, and he didn't edit, because you don't tend to edit your own comics. But it's a very impressive. John Byrne's run on Fantastic Four is very impressive for the simple fact that he did everything. And yeah, you just get some absolutely stunning panels. These panels of the panels of Thor, especially in the first issue when he's clearing when him and Iron Man are clearing the tunnels. Like, it's just some very impressive artwork. And I think that's maybe what makes the art in this story so impressive, is it's all really good, and there's such a wide range of the Marvel Universe in there. It really works, And I do like that they thought to bring Spider-Man and Daredevil into the story, have them be there, that way kind of to dissuade the fan response of, oh, well, why weren't they there? And then, Daredevil kind of says it. He's like, hey, if we can join the fight if the Avengers and the Fantastic Four lose, but at that point, there's not much hope left. And to me, I kind of like that we're not having to deal with these, these, like Spider-Man could maybe hang in the same conversation. Daredevil just can't. I'm sorry. Daredevil's cool. I like Daredevil a lot. He's one of my favorite superheroes. He's just not cosmic scale at all, really. So to me, having him and Spider-Man not try to play in that league really worked. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of a. I just liked the real sense of the Marvel Universe you got throughout this story. Getting your cross references into Rom and Dazzler, and seeing the Avengers and Spider-Man and Daredevil and Doctor Strange. For me, it just worked. It hit all the right notes. I liked seeing that in a more modern comic book story, they would have let Galactus die, and I'm glad they didn't. I'm glad that Reed Richards got to show some of his heroic stripes, save Galactus. And I don't know, it worked for me. Yeah, the story really did just kind of just hit all the right notes for me. There was no moment where I was like, okay, come on, what are we doing here? I don't know. That's really all I got on this one. Would highly recommend. From what I've heard, the whole John Byrne run on Fantastic Four is pretty good. But so far, this is all I've read of it. So I'd recommend it. I'd recommend this specific story. But yeah, honestly, I think that's really all I've got today. So yeah, I'm just another guy named James. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.